Friday, June 1st, 1883. Dear Aria, it has been many days since I wrote in you. This is because I did not have anything to say. Now I do. Last night, after Mama and Papa went to sleep, I left the wagon to meet Edie. Teresa was awake, so I told her that I was going into the woods for nature's call, which I did do. But she was with her JW, so I don't think she cared where I went. I met Edie near a trail that led to the Indian camp, which is a long walk from the clearing. We were scared, especially when we got close enough to see the fire and the shapes of people, but we kept very quiet and crept up on them without being noticed. They had a great bonfire, which made everything, faces, bodies, clothes, trees, and grass, glow a warm yellow-orange. Most of the Indian men were sitting around the fire, some hitting drums and the rest singing, though Edie thought it sounded much more like the sounds of coyotes howling. Some Indian women were there too, and a few children, but most of the children were asleep. I saw Mr. Cross and a few other men from our group, which made me feel safer. I did not know Hildy very well. She was older, and her parents did not let her play very much, so I was surprised at how sad the drumming and singing made me feel, and I think Edie felt the same way, because I saw her wipe away a tear. Then Edie yawned, and so did I, so we went back and only got lost for a little bit. Teresa looked at me crossly and said I should be asleep. I just said I wasn't and climbed back inside. I listened to Teresa and John Wilson whispering until Nana started to snore. I am your Indian scout, Antoinetta. Friday, the 1st. Dear Aria, the train left early today, with no sign of the Indians. There was a rough, narrow trail cut through the trees, and we were told Army supply wagons sometimes use it. Walking hard today, and even riding looked painful the way Mama and Papa bounced on the spring seat. I wondered how Seamus's broken leg did on such a broken trail. Made just 8 miles. End. TAV. Sunday the 2nd. Dear Aria, hard day. Wagons had to be pulled and pushed up 2 stony hills, which took many hours and much cursing. Some grumbling about the route, and a number of the men, Uncle Eugenio included, complained to Mr. Keel, who said something to Mr. Beaulieu, who said the trail is flatter once we are beyond the woods. I am not sure this reassured many. J.W. helped with our wagon, and walked with us a while after. Later, I walked with Mary Margaret. She said people, her father included, are very angry with Mr. Beaulieu and the Indians about what happened to the Hess girls and about this trail, and not happy that Mr. Keel has not done anything. I asked her what Mr. Keel was supposed to do, and she said she did not know. End. TAV. Sunday the 3rd. Dear Aria, trail rocky and slow, but we made 12 miles, and Mr. Beaulieu looked pleased. The sun made the day hotter, and Papa had me drive the wagon some, so he could rest. Nana grumbled about the weather, that it is icy cold in the morning, melting hot in the afternoon. It can never make up its mind, she said. I reminded her of the days last September, when she said the weather was perfect, but Nana insisted that she has never, ever felt a perfect day in the United States. When I told her we were not in the United States, she said I was being fresh, and that in her village children speak with respect to their elders, and never, ever point out their errors. But I was giggling by the time she finished, and later I ran to Mary Margaret's wagon to tell her Nana said, in our village, and when I did we both laughed, and her grandmother said, in our village girls control their behavior in public, but neither of us could, and for an instant it felt like I was with Francesca back home. I feel guilty for feeling this way, which is silly, because I am sure Francesca would not be upset. I can see J.W. heading this way, and will end. TAV. Sunday, June 3rd, 1883. Dear Aria, Edie and I made walking visits today. We started with Coyote Cow, then went to Mr. Cross's. He told us all about India and Tibet and about mountains so high no one has ever climbed to the top. Next, I asked Mrs. Grosso to tell us about I Morty. Early in November, there's a holy day called All Souls' Day by the church. but everyone in Sicily calls it I Morti, which means the dead. At night on I Morti, all of the dead come out of their graves and wander through the town looking for boys and girls. If the child has been good and has said prayers for the dead, they receive a toy or a sugar statue. Edie wanted to know what happened to bad children, and Mrs. Grosso crossed herself, and so did Edie, but she is not Catholic, so she crossed herself backwards. Mrs. Grosso said, I knew one girl who never said a prayer for her dear dead uncle, not one, ever, even though he had been very kind to her and her family. On I Morti, her dead uncle came right to the girl's bedroom, where she was hiding under the bed. Will you remember me now? Edie's eyes were very wide when she heard this, and after we left, Edie said she was going to be sure to say a prayer every night for the two Hess girls, because she would hate to have them follow her all the way to the Idaho Territory. I will say a special prayer for the Hess girls, too. Sincerely, Antoinetta. March the 4th. Dear Aria, Mr. Beaulieu said we were behind schedule, so we struck camp early, and had cold meat, bread, and milk for breakfast. Left the woods a little after noon, but the trail through the grass is not as smooth as some hoped. One of Mr. Beaulieu's men said if you want government roads, you should have stayed home. I drove a little, but walked along Zemphaniah most of the afternoon, and Mary Margaret accompanied me. She is such a kind friend. J.W. is to tend the herd tonight. End. T.A.V. Tuesday the 5th. Dear Aria, same as yesterday, only hotter. Mary Margaret and I walked and talked together, and then J.W. came riding up. He wanted to know what you girls are chattering on about, and Mary Margaret said we girls were not chattering on about anything. I think J.W. did not like the way she spoke to him, because he grew quiet and then left. I felt very strange about this, and I suppose J.W. is angry at me too for not saying anything. I did not think what he said was so bad, but there was something about the way he said girls and chattering that did bother me. A little. But I was not sure how to say all this, and not have both of them angry at me. I was thinking all this over when Netta started complaining about Nana. Papa told Netta that she had to gather sticks, wood, bones, or boards she found along the trail and put them in the wagon for our fires. But every time she throws a piece in, Nana yells at her. I was going to chase her away when I had an idea and told Papa. At our next stop, he took a piece of canvas and nailed it under the wagon, leaving it loose in the middle. Now Netta can run up to the wagon and toss what she finds into the sling without bothering Nana. Papa saw it loaded with things to burn and told me it was a very clever idea, and Mama and Nana agreed. Imagine that! End. T.A.V. Wednesday the 6th at noon. Dear Aria, another hot day and little water. A few wagons could not keep up and had to drop out of line to follow as best they could. We have stopped to rest and feed the animals, though Zephaniah and Red Top look impatient to be going. Shep thinks they must smell water up ahead. Shep is going to ride with the stock animals, and he invited Ernesto to help him. Papa said it was okay, and the two rode off, Ernesto going thumpity-thump on General O'Brien, and holding his hat from blowing off. I could see that Mama was not pleased with this, but she did not say anything. The call has been made to start again. End. T.A.V. 5 o'clock. Much excitement. Indians, 8 of them, were seen far off to the north following the train. Mr. Beaulieu did not recognize them, and rode out toward them, but they did not want to speak to him, and disappeared instead. Mr. Beaulieu called a meeting and told us they were probably just curious, but then he ordered everyone to be on the alert, assigned extra guards for tonight, and sent riders back to make sure the trailing wagons are safe. Everyone is nervous now. Mama made Netta and I stay near the wagon, and is upset that Ernesto is not in her sight. Netta is upset because now she cannot escape doing chores. No visitors today. End. T.A.V. Later still. Mary Margaret visited. Her mother, who is not so strict as her father, said she could come as long as she stayed inside the circle of wagons. She brought a book called John Halifax, Gentleman, and we took turns reading it aloud by the fire, though we laughed more than read, because the story and people are so silly. Nana said we sounded like chickens in a barnyard, and that an Indian would hear us and head straight for us like a fox to gabbling geese. Mary Margaret said that if that happened she would hit him on the head with her book, and that would give him food for thought. Nana did not understand the joke, but she did say, "Good, and give him a hard hit for me, and one for baby Tomas and Antoinetta, and your fellow goose too." End. TAV. Thursday, June 7th, 1883. Dear Aria, Teresa said I could carry you today, though she did not look happy about it. Edie and I went up and down the train and asked people what was the silliest name they had ever heard. A few people thought it wasn't a nice question to ask, or suggested we say prayers for our safety instead. Mr. Cross laughed when we asked him, and said he had once met a man named Rufus Griswold. He said Rufus Griswold is not such a funny name, except that he operated a grist mill in the town of Grindstone, Maine. Mr. Cross said the phrase Griswold's grist mill of Grindstone has never left his head since. Mrs. Anderson said there were two brothers near her father's farm named Irwin and Erstatius Beadle. Then we met Mr. Keel walking toward the front of the train. He has been very quiet and sad-looking since Hildy and Katerina drowned, and I did not want to bother him. But Edie just went up to him with our question. I worried he might be very stern, but he wasn't. He smiled a very big smile, and said he once knew a man named Thurlow Weed. The man didn't have any weeds on his entire property, not a one, not in the cornfields, not in the vegetable garden, not in the flower beds. There was only one weed on the place, and that was Thurlow Weed himself. I am not sure the story is true, but Mr. Keel was nice to tell it to us, and it was good to see him smile again. Here is a list of some of the other names we heard. Eldon Drammy, Esmeralda Blop, Heavenly Farmer, Holden Hat. One of Mr. Beaulieu's men said he had met an Indian called Big Hat on Small Head, but did not know why, since the man had a regular-sized head and hat. Edie's grandmother said we should stop making fun of people, and that everyone on our list would probably think our names were very silly. So I added our names to the list just to show that we were not being mean. Teresa wants you back, so I will close. Sincerely, Antoinetta. Thursday the 7th. Dear Aria, Indians appeared again and followed until Mr. Beaulieu went out to talk. J.W. rode up, and I was about to say something about the other day, to explain why I had been quiet and what I was feeling, when he asked, "Is she going to stop by soon?" I did not like the question, but tried not to be angry. "She may," I said, and I asked if that was a problem. J.W. looked annoyed and wanted to know why she didn't like him. I told him that wasn't true, but that Mary Margaret didn't like when he said we were chattering girls. "That's silly," he said. "I didn't mean anything by it. She can't be very smart if she didn't know that. She has a name, Mary Margaret, and I guess you think I'm silly and not very smart too because I didn't like it either." J.W. swallowed hard and was about to say something, but all that came out was and ah, and that I wasn't being fair. Papa coughed then, I think because both our voices were getting loud. J.W. glanced at Papa, then back at me, and then he turned his horse and rode off in a hurry. I was angry with J.W., but I was surprised when he rode off so suddenly, and hurt, and annoyed with myself that I had gotten angry. Why can't I control my temper the way Mrs. Curran tells me to? Now he probably won't ever come back. I was thinking things like that when Nana told me to carry Tomas, which helped take my thoughts off J.W. A little, anyway. Heavy dark clouds blowing in, looking like I feel, and Papa said he can smell rain. End. TAV. I almost forgot. Mr. Beaulieu does not think the Indians that have been following us are Sioux. End again. TAV. Friday morning the 8th. Dear Aria, an emergency meeting is taking place near Mr. Keel's coach. 3 cattle and 2 horses are missing and were probably stolen from the herd during last night's storm. Everyone suspects the Indians who have been following us, and a number of people want to go after them. Mr. Beaulieu said no, we have no proof anything was stolen, and besides, someone would probably shoot themselves by mistake. Mr. Hess thought they might come back if we let them get away with stealing so easily. Mr. Blewell didn't think so, but a lot of people disagreed with him, and then someone reminded the group about the Hess girls and that we had to teach the Indians a lesson. Mr. Blewell got very angry, but no one was listening to him, so he called us all fool amateurs and stomped off. Mr. Keel raised his arms and called for order, and it took him several minutes to calm everyone down. He was for listening to Mr. Blewell, and most people agreed, but some still wanted to look for the thieves. The meeting broke up into little groups, and I saw J.W. with his father and several other men and women. Mary Margaret said she had to help her mother, and I decided to go back to the wagon. Nana was following Tomas as he waddled through the grass and underneath the Empress Christina. Mamma was baking bread. Everything looked so normal. You would not guess that such an angry meeting was going on at the same time. End. TAV. Later. 8 men have gone off after the thieves, including Mr. Hess. Mr. Blewell warned them not to do anything stupid. He also said he was not waiting for them and ordered us to get ready to leave. Volunteers will drive their wagons if needed. I heard Papa tell Mama and Nana that there are very bad feelings about Mr. Blewell and the Indians, but that he agreed about not going after the thieves. What if all the Indians come back, he wanted to know? Ernesto said he wasn't afraid of any number of Indians and wished he could go with the posse and shoot them. And Papa said he was being silly, even for a 10-year-old, and did not understand what he was saying. Ernesto said he did too, and that Papa was just scared. Nana was shocked when she heard this, and told him to hold his tongue, or he would feel the cane on his backside. Mama would never allow that, so Ernesto did not hold his tongue, until Papa told him if he was going to act like a baby, he could stay with Tomas all day, and Mama agreed. It promises to be a hot day. End. TAV. Friday, June 8th, 1883. Dear Aria, Ernesto has to stay in the wagon today for talking back, and the Empress Christina and General O'Brien are both clumping along behind. Mr. Cross let me ride with him in the morning. I asked how the cattle and horses could have been stolen, since we had guards watching them. He thought the thieves wore dark buffalo skins, so they could creep close during the downpour. Then they gently separated a few animals from the herd and absquatulated with their booty. The story was nice, but I liked the big word best. I asked what it meant and had Mr. Cross say it and spell it several times. Up until now, the biggest word I knew was Mississippi. Teresa wants you back. Good night, friend. Antoinetta. Still Friday the 8th. Dear Aria, no sign of the men, so Mr. Blewell sent someone out to see if they were all right. We are almost off Indian land, which is a great relief to Mama. I'm going to visit Mary Margaret now. Have not seen J.W. since the meeting. End. TAV. Saturday the 9th. Dear Aria, the men have returned and all are safe. They seem pleased with themselves and each other, even though they only got 2 steers back, the other being shot by accident by one of our men. The Indians rode away with the horses, and our men decided it was too dark to follow. One of our men bragged about the fight, and Mr. Blewell told him he read too many dime novels for his own good. That started another big argument, and Mr. Keel and Mr. Anderson had to pull the two apart, with Mr. Keel saying, "Friends, friends, remember the spirit of our adventure. There is no need for uncivil words." To which Mr. Blewell said, "Words? I'll let 'em feel an uncivil fist, I will." When Mama heard about the fight, she said that Netta and I could not go to any more meetings. Netta was upset and said it wasn't fair, but I didn't. Since leaving Watertown, Mama had issued so many do-nots and forgotten just about all of them. Maybe she is distracted, or maybe she is tired. All I know is that Mama lets me do things she would not back on Wooster Street. She even told me I drive the wagon better than Papa, but that I shouldn't tell him she said so. J.W. rode past our wagon today. It did not say hello or even tip his hat to Mama. At first I felt hurt and blamed myself and my bad temper. Now I think he is just being a stupid little boy and rude besides. I do not like wasting all these thoughts on someone so stubborn. Hot, dry, and little wind today. Could see dark shapes far off to the southwest, which Shep thinks might be the Black Hills. End. TAV. Still Saturday. Dear Aria, Mary Margaret was helping cook supper when her dress caught fire and blazed up. Luckily, her mother pushed her to the ground and beat out the flames, but not before Mary Margaret's legs and arms were burned. I visited her a while and read her some of John Halifax's Gentlemen, and we laughed a little like before. Her legs hurt, but she is most upset because her long hair was singed and had to be cut off short. I am going over there now to see if her mother needs any help. End. TAV. Saturday the 10th. Dear Aria, Mary Margaret's legs did not hurt as much today, but the henbane made her tired, and she slept a lot even with her wagon bumping along. I went back and forth between their wagon and ours to help her mother, who is still upset and nervous about what happened. She seems happy to have someone to talk to when Mary Margaret is asleep. Her husband hardly talks, though he is a kind man and treats his horses gently. I am almost as tired as after the first day's walking, but the work and talk have kept my mind clear of him. To sleep. End. TAV. Monday the 11th. Dear Aria, all done in, and I still have to clean dishes and the kettle, then go over to see Mary Margaret and help her mother. I was able to rest when the train encountered a herd of cattle heading north for summer grazing. The cattle train runs from down near Mexico all the way up north near Canada, and is some 400 yards wide and worn deep like a dry riverbed. It took nearly an hour for the cattle to pass, and I fell asleep with Tomas in the wagon. Nana said he rode by our wagon more than once, and said hello to her each time. I wonder what that means, if anything. End. TAV. Monday, June 11th, 1883. Dear Aria, Edie and I talked with a real cowboy today. He had ridden away from the herd to get a calf when he saw us. He said hello, and we said it was nice to meet him, and asked where he was from. He said, "Oh, here and there, and sometimes in between, but mostly wherever there's food and fire and work." We gave him a yellow flower that he stuck in the band of his hat. Then he tipped it in our direction, and rode off with the calf over his saddle. Sincerely, Antoinetta. Tuesday the 12th. Dear Aria, rode with Mary Margaret most of the day. She is feeling better, and much hungrier. I had to run back to our wagon twice for the biscuits Mamma had made in the morning, and Nana smiled and said our family had been blessed with another hungry girl. Netta said he stopped her and asked if I was okay, but when she told him where I was, he rode off scowling. Netta wanted to know why he was annoyed, and why I had such a strange look on my face, and I told her to mind her own business, which wasn't very nice, I suppose. I guess Netta has not read my part of the diary since I told her not to, so I shouldn't be upset if she is curious. End. TAV. Wednesday the 13th. Dear Aria, Mary Margaret much better, and we had a fine ride today. The train came upon a tiny windowless cabin, if you can call a pile of sticks, broken boards, pieces of wood, animal hides, and grass a cabin, next to a small clear pond. An ancient-looking man hobbled out of the cabin. He had a long, scraggly beard, unwashed hair down his back, and very few teeth in his head that I could see. As soon as she saw him, Nana made the sign of the cross and whispered, "It is St. Onofrius reborn." The man seemed troubled by the light, but managed to look all along the train. Then he said he would sell us water for $5 a wagon. Mr. Bouillul said we don't pay for water on open grasslands, and the man said he owned the land and the water, and Mr. Bouillul said prove it. Back and forth they went until it was decided that $5 would pay for all of the wagons in stock. The old man called us thieves, but he pocketed the coins and went back inside his cabin. From inside he kept on complaining the entire time we got water, and probably when the stock was watering as well. Mr. Bouillul said the man has lived there for over 10 years and tries to charge anyone who happens by for water. Lone travelers, cattle herds, army soldiers, priests and preachers, even Indians. Mr. Bouillul has no idea what he does with his money, or even what his name is. Mary Margaret and I talked about J.W. Yes, I have decided to use his initials again, and she said I was right to be annoyed at him, and that boys can be stupid. She also said I shouldn't be stupid and just do about him. I should say something to him and be done with it. I am not sure I can do this, but I did practice what I might say and how I would say it. End. TAV. Wednesday, June 13th, 1883. Dear Aria, Edie and I were playing when I slipped and sat down in the pond. It was great fun until I thought of Mamma and what she would say. But she did not say anything, except that I should change, wash my dress and stockings, and clean my shoes. I think Mamma's back must be hurting again for her to say nothing. Nana did say something, so I guess her back does not hurt. Yours, wet and dry, Antoinetta. Friday the 15th. Dear Aria, crossed another cattle route, though we saw nothing of the cattle except their chips. Made good time even in the hot water, and came upon 4 wagons near a stream late in the day. A sign on one of the wagons said, Hippolyte Labree's Traveling Variety Shop. Shakespeare, our specialty. Mr. Beaulieu wanted to continue, but Mr. Keel and the association persuaded him to stop for the night so straggling wagons could catch up. Mr. Keel asked Mr. Labree to perform for the train. I think to get our minds off all the bad that has happened and all of the angry words. But Mr. Labree said no. He held up a copy of the Black Hills Pioneer newspaper with a headline that read, Silver Found! All his players, except for one boy, had left for the diggings in the Black Hills, and took all his horses besides. People from the trade crowded around Mr. Labree to ask him where the silver mines were located, and Mr. Labree read parts of the article out loud, which made everyone even more excited. Mr. Keel looked worried, and I think he was sorry he made Mr. Beaulieu stop the train. Everyone was talking now, Uncle Eugenio and Papa included, and went on talking. Mamma pushed into the crowd, and she has never, ever done anything like that before. To get Papa to move the wagon and take care of Zephaniah and Red Top. But half the train just sat where it had stopped for an hour or longer, horses and oxen still hitched up, pawing the ground, snorting and waiting, while the men and women and children chattered on about silver. End. TAV. 9 o'clock. Papa said I can use the fire for 5 minutes more only. Mr. Keel and the rest of the association went through camp earlier, trying to calm people about the silver strike. They said the reports might be false, that the land might be privately owned, that there might not be very much silver. Remember, you're part of a community now, a very special one where you'll have a fair chance to succeed, to prove yourself, Mr. Keel pleaded. Don't throw it away because of a newspaper story. Uncle Eugenio told them that having a silver strike so close was also an opportunity, and then asked, Aren't you a little curious about the silver, too? A little bit? Mr. Keel hesitated a second, then said, A little, yes, I admit it. I am a little curious, but not enough to take me away from our adventure here. But that tiny bit of delay before answering the question told me he was more than just a little curious. And it said the same thing to a lot of other people, too. Think about what you have right here, in this community, Mr. Keel said, and many people nodded their heads in agreement, but not everyone. But think about what might be out there in the silver fields just waiting for us to take it, the tall man with the stern look answered. Think about that, too. And many people nodded their heads to his words. All of this talk made me nervous, because it was just like the talk that got us here in the first place. Time to put out the fire, says Papa. End. TAV. Saturday, June 16th, 1883. Dear Aria, Last night after supper, I went to tell Mr. Labree that Shakespeare was misspelled. I could not find Mr. Labree, but a boy named William was there. I told him, but he told me Mr. Labree didn't care any more. The association had agreed to sell him 2 horses, and Mr. Labree and the boy were leaving for the silver fields in the morning. And it is true, they left before the sun came up today. William also said that Hippolyte Labree was a made-up name. Mr. Labree's real name is Walter Cooper, and he's from Kansas. William showed me the inside of the costume wagon, and let me try on a red wig and a sword. Mr. Labree came back then, but did not mind that we were playing. He even said I could take anything I wanted, so I took the red wig and sword. Mr. Labrie gave me his copy of the Black Hills Pioneer too, so I remember I was part of history. Papa laughed out loud when he saw me. Mamma said I looked ridiculous, but she smiled also. Nana has found some wild onions and greens, and says she will make us soup for supper. I am hungry already. Sincerely, Antoinetta. Silver found. Rich vein opened in Black Hills region. A belt of silver 20 miles wide. Army to maintain order. The land of promise. Yesterday, by way of telegraph, we learned that a rich vein of high-grade silver had been found in the mountains surrounding Pringle. The strike was made over 2 weeks ago, and a claim filed at the United States Assay Office in Hot Springs. It is reported that the Chief of Assay Operations, Justin Longford Bigelow, will travel to the claim in order to inspect and verify it. There is speculation that, judging by the type and formation of the rocks in the region, the vein could be from 10 to 20 miles wide and 10 miles long. Quite possibly, an informant in Hot Springs tells us, this may be as rich a strike as any in the history of Black Hills. Already the roads leading to the area are growing crowded with would-be fortune seekers, and 100 or more individuals have already filed claims of their own. No reports of violence have been made, but town officials warn that supervision by the United States Army will be requested, and that all crimes, major and minor, will be prosecuted to their full term. One employee of this newspaper has already resigned to join in the search for silver. Before leaving, he said, "I am going to dig my fortune out of the rocks with my own hands. I am going to the land of promise." The newspaper is sending special correspondent William Stone to the area, and his detailed reports will appear in daily form. Saturday the 16th. Dear Aria, what a queer day this has been. We began in the morning by learning that Mr. Labrie and the boy had left for the silver mines. As usual, we had breakfast and then packed the wagon. But very few others did, and the train did not leave. Mr. Beaulieu was furious and shouted at everybody to get ready. But this time, some men told Mr. Beaulieu to be quiet, and that he was just a hired hand. Mr. Keel and Mr. Anderson spent a lot of time with Mr. Beaulieu, trying to calm him down, but I think it would take an army of Mrs. Currans to do that. Finally, Mr. Beaulieu went off to help with the stock, saying we could stay a day, and then he and his men were leaving. Men and women were gathered everywhere in little circles, talking, sometimes loudly. Papa, Uncle Eugenio, and the other men from our street were at the Grosso's wagon, and they all looked so serious. Mamma tried to keep busy, but she was worried and kept glancing at the men. Nana sniffed and said they looked like gentry making big decisions that we will have to clean up. When Mrs. Grosso brought coffee to the group, the men stopped talking until she left them. And when Netta went over wearing her red wig and sword, Papa barked at her to stop playing near them. At one point, Papa came over and told Mamma that Uncle Eugenio wanted to look for silver, and that the others did too. Uncle Eugenio said we had to act quickly, before everyone in the country came running. That was what he had said about Idaho, Mamma reminded him. I know, Papa said, and I told him so. I did. I said, Eugenio, everything we have is in those wagons and the land in Idaho. I told him, we cannot afford to lose any of it. I told him that. But you know Eugenio and his ways. He can be persuasive, and the others agree with him. Mamma told him it was foolish to go off. Her voice was only a little louder than usual, but I could tell she was furious at Uncle Eugenio and Papa. And so was I. When has he ever dug for anything besides onions? Mamma wanted to know. They talked some more, but I couldn't hear much except when Papa said, "But he is my older brother." I could hear it in Papa's voice, and so could Mamma. We had been forced to leave Wooster Street and everything and everyone we knew because of Uncle Eugenio, and now it was going to happen again. What about having a fair chance and opportunity, and working hard and making a better life for us, I wanted to ask him. Or was that just talk? I must have looked very upset, because Nana told me not to worry, and sent me to get water, which I was happy to do. I went to Mary Margaret's first, and she said she wanted to walk a little, so she came with me to the stream. She said her father wanted to look for silver too, but her mother told him she wasn't going with him, and that if he left he shouldn't bother coming back. I was shocked that she would say this, but Mary Margaret swore that's what happened, and her grandparents agreed with her mother. And they are her father's parents. I wish Mamma could be so bold, but I do not think she would ever talk to Papa like that. She says what she thinks, but softly so she does not embarrass or show disrespect to Papa in front of others. That was when I saw Ernesto and a group of the other children. Ernesto had on a metal helmet, like those worn by Roman soldiers, though his was much dented, while others were wearing long caps, hats with big orange feathers, odd-looking dresses and baggy pants, and all sorts of wigs. Some carried swords and shields. Mr. Labrie had left the door to his costume wagon open, with a note saying we could take anything we wanted. And that is how the day went. People talking and arguing and planning, children running through the camp in silly costumes, play acting, Mr. Keel looking upset and more tired, but still saying, "Remember your dreams, friends. Remember the opportunities that await us," though fewer and fewer people were listening to him by this time. End. TAV. 8 o'clock. There was another meeting just after supper. I think Mr. Keel knows that for many the idea of silver is stronger than the idea of Idaho, because he did not spend much time trying to change people's minds. He said that anyone who wanted could go to the silver diggings, and no hard feelings, that everyone owned their own wagons and animals. He said that the train would leave in the morning, and then urged that even if a man wanted to look for silver, he should allow his family to go on. Their families would be safer with the train, he pointed out, and if the silver fields weren't everything they expected, they could turn around and follow us easily. Mr. Beaulieu had agreed to do a map to show them what our route would be, and how to find us. That seemed to quiet some of the hard feelings and worries. The men could ride off on their foolish little adventure, and when they have learned their lesson, they can come back to the wagons and their families. That's how Mamma put it anyway. And that's what Uncle Eugenio and Papa and the others from our street, except for Mr. Carty, decided to do. I was glad, too. I had heard enough about Idaho and our future community to picture it, but a mining camp sounded like a wild place if it needed the United States Army to stop all crimes, major and minor. Mr. Carty said he would stay and watch over the other men's families and possessions. Papa said I would drive the wagon, and Ernesto would help tend the stock herd. Ernesto did not like that I was driving, but Mamma told him to shush and do as he was told. The only other time I remember Mamma looking so sad was during the weeks before we left Wooster Street. Nana had been happy to leave Wooster Street, but she was not happy about Uncle Eugenio and Papa leaving now. They are like donkeys in a line. Each one thinks he is following something sweet, but he is really just following another smelly donkey. End. TAV. Monday the 18th. Dear Aria, 2 long days and hot besides. They, 27 men, 4 with their families, rode off early Saturday morning with much cheerful shouting and waving and promises to come back rich. Papa gave us all a hug and many kisses, and whispered to me to take care of Mamma and to not let Nana bother me too much. Mamma was quiet, and I could tell that she had cried during the night. Nana did not say anything about men being foolish. She just shook her head and looked angry. We watched them ride across the grass until Mr. Beaulieu rode up and down the train telling us to get ready to leave. Since Shep went off too, Mr. Carty helped me yoke Zephaniah and Redtop, and then our day's journey began, though much more quietly than the men's. The only unusual thing was that Aunt Marta pulled in directly behind us, and Rosaria actually smiled at me. Travel very slow, because so many like Aunt Marta are new to driving, and there are so few men to help ease wagons down or push them up steep hills. But we made 10 miles. At one dry riverbed, J.W. helped push us. I wanted to say something to him, and almost did, but there was so much activity that I had to drive off before I could get his attention. He is now with the herd for the night. Not enough water in the barrel to wash off the dust, which has settled in every part of my body and clothes. Besides, I am too tired, and so I will end for now. TAV.